I'm Yvonne Pran with Bible 805, and I'd like to share with you a special presentation I put together, The Faces of the Pharaohs, from the times of Joseph and the Exodus. The Bible's true history, and I would like to share with you a little bit about how the ancient world helps us understand that. Unlike many other world religions, Christianity has maps that show the location of events talked about in the Bible that we can visit today. In addition, artifacts from the ancient world both verify and expand our understanding of biblical events. It isn't always easy to make the connections, but here are some that are related to our study of the Exodus. For the time surrounding the Exodus, there are really extraordinary challenges with Egyptian dating and their recording of it because they used a lot of images, but there was no consistent dating system along with them. However, there's one area that they did document extremely well, and that is the order of the pharaohs, the leaders of the nation, and what they did. Overall, Egypt unfortunately only recorded extremely famous people. And even in that case, they could have variant names, variant spellings, so it's not really easy to put all of it together. They would also erase the personal history of someone who lost favor in some way. If they didn't like someone or they lost a lot of battles or whatever it might be, they just erase all record of them. Now, what follows is based on quite a bit of personal research, and the dating's based on respected conservative biblical scholars, then matching their dates of events with the dates of the pharaohs so that you can see what the pharaohs actually looked like that ruled during the time of certain biblical events. Now, one of the most interesting archaeological images from approximately the time of the Exodus is this hieroglyphic we have of Egyptian slaves building with bricks. Their lighter skin color has been analyzed as that of Hebrews as opposed to various Egyptians, and we also see overseers with a whip or whatever in their hands. This helps verify the setting and the work that was being done during the Exodus. Now, Joseph is the starting point for what we look at in all of these images. When Joseph lived, that's how we date the Exodus. And the website ChristianAnswers.net explains it in this way. It says, supporters of a 12th dynasty date for the Joseph story begin their arguments with a strict literal acceptance of the biblical chronology of the Exodus and sojourn in 1 Kings 6:1 is seen as dating the Exodus to approximately 1446 BC, and Exodus 12:40 is seen as placing the entrance of Jacob and his family then into Egypt, where Joseph holds high office under the reign of Sosostris or Sennacherib. There's various spellings. Like I said earlier, they had various spellings of different things at approximately 1876 BC. Now, with this foundational date, the following shows the images of the pharaohs at various biblical events. And what is exciting to me about this is that they did realistic images of the different people. And so we can look at basically the same faces that the biblical characters saw. So let's get started. Senusret III was the pharaoh of Joseph's story. It was a time of really great power and prosperity for Egypt, and he had very good relations with the surrounding nations. Now, he was also the one who Joseph would have introduced his family to. So here you can look at that. You can see what Joseph and his family looked at when they were welcomed into Egypt. Now, following his rule, though, as we know from the biblical story, things didn't go well. And historically, a group called the Hyksos arrived, and scholars believe that they were the rulers who knew not Joseph. Famine drove the Semitic people into Egypt. They had superior weapons, they had compound bows and chariots, yet their takeover was relatively peaceful, but they did install themselves as the rulers. But, as I said earlier, as the biblical record tells us, they knew not Joseph, nor did they have the respect for him and his people. Their capital city was near Goshen, and they ruled a little over 100 years, and they were the ones that scholars believe initially enslaved the Hebrew people. The Egyptian rulers then regained power. However, they possibly continued to oppress the Hebrews more because they were the same ethnic heritage as the Hyksos people. Also, they could use their labor, and they wanted slaves to be building a lot of the fantastic things that they were building at that time. Now, in approximately 1506 BC, Thutmose I becomes Pharaoh. And he was very, very strong. He had great military campaigns, an extensive building program. Karnak, that incredible archaeological find and monument in Egypt, was started by him. He had children by his royal wife, and all of them died, though, except for a daughter, Hatshepsut. Now, she is extremely significant. He married her to Thutmose II, who was the son of a secondary wife, in other words, her stepbrother. But the Egyptians intermarried in very odd ways all throughout their history. But the kingship was only supposed to go to the child of a royal wife. So Hatshepsut, she actually seized power for herself. Thutmose had a child with a lesser wife also, who would actually eventually succeed him as Pharaoh. But in the meantime, he was very weak, and Hatshepsut proclaimed herself Pharaoh, and she was the princess who found Moses. She also ruled Egypt. She was very powerful, very strong. She built a lot. She was just really an extraordinary woman. And you can see here in the video, see the picture of her as a sphinx. She's actually wearing what they call the ceremonial beard of the pharaoh, and had a sphinx made of herself, all images of great, great power. Now, Moses was her adopted son. He was given the finest education, but we know in Hebrews 11:24-25, it tells us, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Just that statement is really interesting. Not the son of Pharaoh or whatever, Pharaoh's daughter, Hatshepsut. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Meanwhile, his half-brother, Thutmose III, was growing up. Now, Moses tries to do God's will his way. He kills a man and he flees to Midian, where he will spend the next 40 years. Now, Thutmose III, he would have grown up while Moses was in Midian. He is the Pharaoh of the Exodus. He was very powerful, very arrogant. He fought many, many battles prior to the time of the Exodus, won them all, conquered a lot, a ton of history about this. But one of the things that's fascinating in the historical record, even of Egypt, is that there were no battles recorded, no victories recorded after 1446, which is, of course, the traditional date of the Exodus. And we believe that that was because his army was destroyed in the Red Sea. Now, of course, Egypt doesn't say that, but the dates line up perfectly. Then his son was Amenhotep II, and he was not nearly as powerful as his father, but there is a rather interesting story of him being very fixated on taking thousands of slaves as plunder in the battles that he fought, and we surmise that perhaps he did that because Egypt lost its major source of slave labor with the Exodus. Now, just a few conclusions. The Bible tells us true stories, and history can give us confidence that what we read really happened. And it's also just fascinating to look at, fascinating to see the pictures of the people involved. Plus, it adds real depth, history does, depth and detail to our understanding of the Bible. But we must always remember that our trust is not in the history, but in our God. I'm Yvonne Prin with Bible 805.